So it's a Sunday evening. I'm sitting down preparing next week's write-up, and it sort of hits me that I've been doing this for around about 6 months now. Writing about the art and design of watches, preparing images, doing voiceovers and recordings. This week has been a bit of a slow week, but the joke is I have about 3 write-ups finished and ready to go. It's just the remaining hours that need to go into preparing it that takes the most amount of time. And I really didn't feel like doing it today. There's something that just said, no, just sit down and do a recording instead. And I thought, well, the majority of what I prepare is all scripted. I'm reading from a script to you. And instead of that, I thought, why not have a place where I can just sit down and discuss subjects, whether it's relating to art and design of watches, topics pertaining to anything, but keep it completely unscripted. See, the thing is, when I'm talking through a script, I'm not fully there. I'm almost like a soundboard. And as much as I try and engage in the comment section and all of the rest, there is that disconnect where I think here we can be a lot more open and talk about, just have a general discussion. And that's what I hope IDGuy audio comes across as. Fully unscripted, talking about all sorts of bizarre subjects. It gives me a bit of a break, and I hope you can enjoy the discussions that happen in this space. Of course, this is more of a community outreach thing, so it would be awesome for all of you to comment below and just engage in the conversation. I think we've managed to build quite a tight-knit community over the last few months, and it really means so much that all of you can watch this and enjoy what I'm putting out. It's such a privilege to be in a position where I'm receiving emails from you asking my opinions and questions about subjects. It's never a dull day, and it really is. It's such a lot of fun doing this, and this is why I enjoy it so much. So as I was sitting here thinking about what subjects we could talk about in the first part, the easy one would be to talk about the channel and how it began and where it is now and where I hope it goes. But really, I think it'll be more fun to talk about the subject of watches, and more importantly, why do we love watches? Everyone has a different answer to it, and I think it'll make for an excellent dialogue, especially hearing your feedback on the subject too. But I can give you a few things that I've found over the last few years of being in this hobby and experimenting and seeing what I like, what I dislike. And it should be a nice to and fro that a designer can give a little bit of a different perspective on the subject. So unlike many of you, I'm sure, I'm quite new to this hobby. I only began following watches around 2012, 2013. At the time, I just started studying, and I just found these things fascinating, these little objects that you wear on a daily basis. I can't say I really come from a family that wears watches, and it was just an interesting fascination that caught my attention. I followed a few channels on YouTube. I started reading articles by Hodinkee and all of those. And I didn't really pay much attention to it. But over time, as we've gotten to this point now, I think there's one aspect that's important to highlight about watches as products that isn't emphasized enough. Nowadays in the product and the consumer industry, objects are designed with the intention of obsolescence factoring into their life cycle. And what obsolescence basically means is that everything has a shelf life, whether that's 1 year, 6 months, 5 years, a decade. The product eventually dies and needs to be replaced. And the more I think about it, I can't find a real product that is made with the sole intention of not having obsolescence factored in whatsoever. Watches are almost the antithesis of obsolescence. So instead of having a product that will last you a year, these things will last you a generation, maybe 2 generations. And all the while, these things can go in and get repaired and serviced. And it's quite fascinating to think that these products that are so personal are also some of the most long-lasting products that are around. But of course, that's like the very analytical approach of things. Why else do we enjoy watches? I just think they are amazing accessories for anybody. And they say a lot about someone, like the style of watch that you choose, whether it's dress, whether it's sports, what materials you like, what aesthetics you like about them. It expresses a lot about what you appreciate as a person. And that's really what I've wanted this channel to be about, which is honing in on those little aspects that aren't covered well enough. At the same time, they are accessories that we just wear everywhere, to different situations, different environments, different settings. It's pretty amazing. It's one of the most intimate products that we can own as well. And if I remember back to when Apple launched the Apple Watch a couple of years ago, that was one of the biggest selling points that they tried to emphasize, was that watches are these very intimate things, pieces of art that you wear and use on a daily basis. And they all have a different meaning to us. I know a lot of people who just wear watches because they tell the time. But then for us who appreciate the smaller detail behind it, there is a lot more to it. I mean, they are time machines in many ways. They have been worn for decades by different people, whether it's different family members, people in the service, people who've used them for all sorts of encounters in their lives, and they all tell stories. And I think that's where the attraction of watches with patina and age, factor in. Of course, they're very attractive looking watches, but at the same time, they have that little added story that makes them all the more unique. I actually mentioned it in a recent video about the military submariner and all of that. But it's amazing to see just how the history of the watch has changed. The original wristwatch began as a fashion accessory for women in the early 1900s. And once the First World War broke out, men decided to wear these things because they were easier to use than pocket watches. And that trend just caught on. And we're at a point now where it's very difficult to consider that people actually use pocket watches nowadays. It's a very different time we're living in now. And it's interesting how these two areas sort of blend, where you have functionality, but you also have high fashion sort of colliding together. We're in an age now where we need something that functions the best, performs the best. That's why I think dive watches are so popular. And this crossing is also quite fascinating when you think about it. Getting back on the topic, why else do we love watches? Well, I find it fascinating that you can buy watches for the same amount of money that you can buy pieces of art, except you can wear these pieces of art on your wrist. I also admire the fact that you can buy watches for a couple of dollars and they perform just as well for years and years, and they are just equal as a utility as the art pieces you wear on your wrist. And I think now, just talking about it, form and function plays a role in all of this. We appreciate the aesthetic of the thing, but we equally appreciate the fact that it works so well and that it does what we want it to do. It's also hilarious to think that these things are so anachronistic when we have smartphones and the time everywhere. But at least for me, I think wristwatches are a disconnect from the world around us. The digital everything that surrounds us, digital phones, laptops, computers, Wi-Fi, all of this. We have these mechanical objects that just simply tell you the time, maybe the date, maybe the time in a different time zone, has a feature that lets you, determine the number of minutes that have elapsed. But other than that, that's pretty much their purpose. That and something that you can just wear and enjoy, look down at and appreciate for a myriad of other reasons. But it's a fascinating thing when you think about just how far watches have come over the last century, what they've been used for, how many different environments they've been built around, whether it's formal, whether it's more sport-oriented, how these two areas are now coming together in our modern age, where we're having these formal watches being put on rubber straps, for example, and being used in these situations. It's crazy to see just how these trends have changed and where the market is sort of dictating where watches go. But it's an amazing hobby, I think, and I enjoy it the most because I can wake up in the morning and say, okay, today I'm writing about Rolex or Omega or Patek Philippe or any other name, and just appreciate them for being more than just objects we wear, but as something a little bit deeper than that. I've gotten to a point now where I can sit back and think of them more as how an art critic would look at a painting on a wall. Not so much as you need to own the thing to appreciate it, but you can sit back and say, that was a very interesting approach, and why? So it's an open-ended question about why we love these things. There's so many reasons why. I like the fact that they've been used in movies, they've been illustrated differently, they've all been made with a specific function and purpose in mind. And it's really down to us to hone in on what function and purpose we like out of these objects. That's also something interesting to factor in. But it's a discussion that we could probably have till the end of time and never really come up with a finite answer. I'm sure if I spent a few hours writing about it, maybe there'll be some kind of more direct reasoning behind why we love these things. But sometimes it's not so much what the head wants, but it's what the heart wants. And I think that's also something fascinating. What is interesting about design? I sort of consider design to be logical art in a way. You have these masterpieces of creation in front of you, but instead of just trying to interpret what the meaning was behind it, you kind of ask the question why it was done. And in a similar way, I think that's what's so fascinating about watches, is you get a time to sit down and actually say, well, why are these things made the way they are? Why the size? Why the proportion? Why the dial? Why the color? And all of these have a reason, and it's really down to the individual to sort of come up with an idea why they think this thing was chosen. But really, I think anyone who appreciates the subject of watches and what they mean and why we have them, we appreciate them a lot more than just things that tell us the time. It's very difficult to hone in on the finite answer, but they are a lot more than just time-telling devices. They are accessories that we wear on a daily basis that we appreciate for a different reason, because they sort of take us back in time to a simpler time. They're also these things that serve a purpose in our everyday lives, whether that's telling us the date, the time, elapsed time, all of these different factors. And in the end, we may never truly find out why we find these things so fascinating, but it's well worth trying to find out the reason.